And that is absolutely due to Caitlin Clark. Her fan base across the United States and probably across the world has really helped to grow the sport of women's basketball, and they show up to support her. And so it has been many times this season where I've been in an arena and I will see just as many home team fans as I have seen in Indiana jerseys or even Iowa jerseys, people representing both, representing her. So it makes a difference in the atmosphere. I mean, clearly I cover Connecticut. They faced Connecticut twice at home, and both times there were a significant amount of Indiana fans in the building.
You can see her cover the WNBA's Connecticut Sun as a sideline reporter and covering the W as a whole on networks such as NBC Sports and CBS Sports. We welcome back Terrika Foster-Brasby onto Hoopsology. Welcome back, Terrika.
Hey, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on to the show. Really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to talking to you this entire season, just discussing the W. So many things have gone down, and I have a billion questions to ask you just in terms of, I feel like this season has been just a landmark change as a league as a whole. But I want to zoom in on the Connecticut Sun. I don't want to forget them. So let's cover them first. So we're approaching the end of the regular season. They finished 5-5 the last 10 games. What do you make of their season so far? Have they exceeded or have they been a disappointment in terms of their expectations? Where do you gauge them just as this regular season so far, considering all the attention and considering that they've been at the top of the conference as a whole, but yet they've been 500 recently?
Yeah, no, honestly, I think Connecticut is really just continuing to play the game that they've always played. And they're continuing to stay on the line that they've always been on. They've always been a top team in this league. They still are. They have always been a team that has done very well defensively. That is still the bread and butter to their team. I do hope that as they get closer to the postseason, and by closer, I mean like within the week, that they could figure out how to return back to that balanced scoring that had helped them midway through the season. Over the last 10 games, that's been one of the biggest issues, is that they have not been able to perform offensively to the magnitude that they want to and that they need to for postseason play. They have been a team that has prided themselves on having all 5 of their starters average double figures. But most recently, you will see a game or two where one of their starters may not be as impactful on the offensive end as necessary. And that's difficult to overcome for a team like Connecticut that really takes so much pride in sharing the ball well and getting everybody involved, that when they're not doing that, it can be detrimental to their offense. So I'm hoping that they're able to figure that part out. But, looking at it big picture, I think there is no way that Connecticut can say the season is a disappointment. I mean, they started off the hottest team in the league, literally went undefeated for like 8 games. I think they set themselves up early on in this season so that if they were to hit a rough patch like they have been over the last 10 games, they're able to be okay and still remain a top team in the league.
So what do you think is the best matchup for them in the playoffs? And do you see any roadblocks that could really prevent them from being the champs? Like when you're looking at kind of the playoff landscape, which are teams that you're hoping that they would avoid in order to have the best path to the finals?
Well, as it stands at the time of this recording, the 1 and the 2 seed have already been locked up. So we know that they cannot place any higher than 3. At the 3 seed, they would be entering the postseason playing against the Indiana Fever. And to me, that is a scary matchup because Indiana has played incredibly well over like really since the Olympic break. Kelsey Mitchell has been scary. Like she's played.
Fantastic.
Oh my gosh, she's played so well. Caitlin Clark has figured out that your passing ability and your ability to facilitate is what will really be the glue for everyone else for this team. Christy Size has figured out her rotations. Aaliyah Boston has remembered that she is a beast in this game. And this is a scary team, and their fans travel incredibly well. So even though Connecticut would have home court advantage, every game feels like it's the possibility of being an Indiana Fever game because they will have so many fans in the building. So that is a scary matchup. Honestly, this will not be a favorable opinion, but I would really just rather them be 4th
Gotcha.
right? If they were fourth, they would face Seattle. They have a winning record this season over Seattle, but the matchup is just more favorable for them with Seattle than it is currently with Indiana. So if it were me, I would be like, you know what, y'all might as well just be fourth. But at this point, I don't, they're definitely not trying to do that. And I still think that at the end of the day, they can win against Indiana. Indiana is still young, as talented as they are. Connecticut definitely still has more experience, and they won the season series 3-1, right? So it is very possible that Connecticut will win against Indiana. It's just one of those matchups where I'm like, ooh, that's a
That
scary
makes
one to
sense.
start your postseason.
So you mentioned the Fever, and I want to ask you, you said they travel really well to opposing teams' arenas. Is that something that's common in the W to see opposing teams have a hardcore fan base travel to opposing teams' arena? I live in Denver, so I go to Nuggets games, and the opposing fans make more noise than the Nuggets on a regular basis. So I'm just wondering, in the W, is this a new phenomenon just with Caitlin Clark, or is this something that tends to happen just in terms of just more popular teams around the W?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I want to say it's a little bit of both, right? I've certainly been to arenas where Liberty fans have turned out in drones, where, Las Vegas Aces fans have like been there, shown up. So it is not new to see opposing fan bases travel very heavy. It is very new to see this many Indiana fans travel very heavy. And that is absolutely due to Caitlin Clark. Her fan base across the United States and probably across the world has really helped to grow the sport of women's basketball, and they show up to support her. And so it has been many times this season where I've been in an arena and I will see just as many home team fans as I have seen in Indiana jerseys or even Iowa jerseys, people representing both, representing her. So it makes a difference in the atmosphere. I mean, clearly I cover Connecticut. They faced Connecticut twice at home, and both times there were a significant amount of Indiana fans in the building, just as there were for Connecticut Sun fans. And at times, you could not gauge what was happening in the game based on the cheers. Because usually you can tell when the home team's doing well or when the away team isn't, because you can hear, the cheers are louder for the home team or whatever. But at moments in those games, you couldn't even tell who was cheering for who. At that point, you really just had to watch the game because it was that many fans in the building. And I love that. But I think it also issues a challenge to home fans to really show up for their team. So if you're playing in New York and you're playing at the Barclays Center, which is a huge arena, and they have sold that arena out more times than I can count over the last few years, just based off the way that this sport has grown, it's exciting to see home fans and away fans kind of pack the building out equally. It's really dope.
So I want to get your opinion, because I think the last time we spoke, I think it was around COVID, and this league has really blown up. And I think myself and my co-host, I will speak for him, because we've talked about this, we agree on this, that the W already had momentum, and I felt that started to happen in 2020 specifically, just in terms of just how the sports world was, and now it's just blown up with certainly Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, and Caitlin Clark being the catalyst for that in terms of kind of new eyeballs on the product itself. I want to ask you, you covered this league extensively. Your overall observations of just the fan attention, just if you can mention any stories of just what makes this season so unique compared to others in the past, just in terms of the eyeballs, and where you gauge kind of the league in its future based on what you observed this season.
Well, you're right. And the 2020 season was the season that I think more people started to take a step back and say, hey, like these women are actually really good. Like this league is actually pretty good. But I don't think it had caught mainstream attention in a way that people could just like really say, I am now a fan of this game, right? But I do think that season was a season that, because people literally could not go anywhere and couldn't do anything, and everything from a sports perspective had to shift, that was the season in which people really got a chance to sit down and watch how incredible this product really is. It was also the season that they had just signed this groundbreaking CBA at the time. So there were a lot of things that were moving and shifting in the W internally and externally at that time. given the success and popularity of this 2024 rookie class, because they do so many things well outside of basketball. They use social media well. NIL has helped with branding and marketing. They have already come into the league with sponsorship deals and things, and people. So people are already putting this marketing behind them. And on top of that, they're also bringing their fan base, which is also really dope, because for years, as W supporters and media, we've tried to bridge the gap between college fans and professional WNBA fans, right? Like, how do we bridge that gap? You can always tell where there is UConn players, because UConn's fans will always support UConn no matter what. Tennessee will always support Tennessee players no matter what. With A'ja Wilson, we started to see South Carolina fans come in hard, and they support everything A'ja. So everything A'ja and everything South Carolina, they're on for. Well, now we're really seeing that with Angel, and we're really seeing that with Caitlin. Iowa fans are everywhere because of their want to support for Caitlin Clark. LSU fans already had some dynamic players to come out of the league, and Sylvia Fowles and Simone Augustus. But now you add an Angel Reese to that. Like, it is incredible how we're able to see them translate their collegiate fans to WNBA fans. But again, when you add that extra momentum that they have, because they use social media well, because they're involved in so many other projects, all of those things translate over into just wanting to support everything you do, which includes the WNBA. How players in the WNBA have used that to their advantage is they're saying, hey, we appreciate and we love the fact that all these new eyes are on us, are on the game. Let's continue to show them what we've got. And now you're starting to turn fans who may have tuned in for one or two of the newbies are now watching the league in its entirety, or are now watching teams in their entirety, and they're seeing stars like Arike Ngumbawale, or like, you may have become a Fever fan for Caitlin, but now you can clearly see Kelsey Mitchell is a dog, right?
Exactly.
And I think that that's like the bigger point in the bigger picture. Maybe you are supporting Angel Reese in Chicago, but they've got to play opponents. And so you're looking at those opponents and you're saying to yourself, wow, like that girl's really good, or like this woman can really ball. So I think that's the beauty of all of it. And I hate that so much of this season has been distracted with nonsense and distracted with things that don't have anything to do with things that are happening on the court. And it's really sad in that regard, because there were so many moments that we all should have celebrated. And instead of celebrating that particular moment, we're too busy trying to fight off the misogyny and the racism and the sexism and the homophobia and all of that really have no place in women's basketball.
A quick timeout from the interview to request a favor. If you love our interviews, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video to hear more interviews from the world of basketball, featuring journalists from SB Nation, ESPN, CBS Sports, and The Athletic. Now, back to the interview. No, I co-sign that 1,000%. And I want to touch on that because when coming into this season, if we compare it to the NBA, a lot of the discussions normally on the court. But yet, I think with the Caitlin Clark discussion, what was baffling to me is just this overall sentiment that other players had to be appreciative of Caitlin Clark, which makes no sense to me. Like, they're humans. If they want, and this is the thing that's baffling to me, because you hear all time in sports, hey, athletes are too friendly, they're too nice to each other. And in the WNBA, they're competitive. You see there's real rivalries, and if they don't like Caitlin Clark, good. That's great for ratings. Like, that's great for the league. So I don't understand. This had to be super frustrating for you. I was just like, man, I don't know how Terrika and Christina, or just a lot of the analysts on just these major networks just be pulling their hair out, just like, what is happening here?
It is so nerve-wracking. It was so nerve-wracking, Justin, because you can't. I can say, Alyssa Thomas had a bad game yesterday. Now, she didn't have a bad game yesterday, but I'm just speaking generally. But I could say, Alyssa Thomas had a bad game yesterday, or, Ryan Howard didn't really put up the numbers that she typically puts up. She was slow. She just blah, 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 blah. I could say any of those things if those things were true. And I would not have a flood of people in my inbox or on my Twitter feed, or people telling me I hate Ryan Howard or I hate Alyssa Thomas or any of that. Like, it's basketball. My job as an analyst is to analyze. And that sometimes means saying that these players have done an amazing job at what they've done. And that also sometimes means calling out when their performance wasn't as the standard that they typically perform at, right? It was difficult throughout this season, specifically with Caitlin Clark, because anytime you say any form of criticism about her game or any form of criticism about Caitlin in a written form, it became an attack on the analyst. It became an attack on the network or the person or whatever. And the truth is, this is just basketball. We do this with every single player. And listen, I'd be the first to tell you, there's a reason why I don't play basketball at this level. I knew when to cut out. I knew after high school, I had no shot at playing professionally. So I stayed in my lane and I let those who were good go on to college, my teammates, all of them. I knew they would ball. Great. But I didn't lose what I knew in my head about this game and about this sport, nor did I lose my love for it. So it's interesting that there are people who have never tuned in to women's basketball ever before that would come to us on social media and think that they know more basketball than we do, think that they know more about TV than we do, think they know more about broadcasting than we do, just because we may have said, hey, this wasn't Caitlin's best game.
Yeah.
It's a common criticism, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's crazy.
No, it's ridiculous. And I want to ask you specifically, this is something that's been baffling to me. And I think because of the league's popularity, this narrative has been caught on by mainstream figures that are, seen on a wider media platform. And I think the public sees that without actually doing their homework or really understanding just common sense. And I'm just wondering, you covering this league, did you get an inkling of like this discourse going left immediately, just going left immediately, specifically when it comes to just like players not appreciating Caitlin Clark, which I find ridiculous. I think it started with man, I'm blanking on her name. Phoenix Suns, Diana Taurasi. There you go. I think she was doing the simulcast on the NCAA tournament when they asked her about Caitlin Clark's game, and I think I don't know. I thought
So she made so I know exactly what you're referring to. That was during the national championship.
Yes.
And her and Sue Bird have
Yep.
a simulcast that they do, the Bird and Tarazi show, which is really funny. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say she was actually asked about the rookies in general. So this is how things get misconstrued all the time, right? I'll give you a couple of examples, but this one in particular. She was asked about the rookies in general. And yet, whenever you hear the clips, whenever you hear folks running it back, whenever you see it written, it's written as she said this about Caitlin Clark. No, she didn't say this about Caitlin Clark. She said this about all the rookies, that it takes time to get adjusted to playing in the WNBA, which is the same thing that we say about every athlete coming from college in every single sport that I know of. Do you know how often we hear analysts in the NFL say, when you get to the college, when you're playing football in college, you're playing with 60 other guys, and maybe of those 63 of them will make it to the professional level. It's the same way in basketball. You're playing on a team with 10 other women, 11 other women, 15 other, who knows? You're playing on a team with other women, and of those women, only about 3 of them will probably make an actual roster in the WNBA. It is hard. It is hard. And therefore, these women are bigger, they are stronger, they are faster, and they have a higher IQ because they've been playing a game at a higher level. So the things that you see in college will not automatically transfer in the WNBA the first game, even the second game. But if you give yourself time to learn, to adjust, to pick up and absorb around the people who you're playing with, by the time you get into July and August, you may have then feel a bit more comfortable, and you can start to see that adjustment and that development. That's exactly what happened this year with Caitlin Clark. So Diana was not wrong. Cheryl Swoops was not wrong. These people were not wrong. I said the same thing. We were not wrong. You will not come into the league, as Caitlin Clark did not, shooting logo threes, like shooting 70% from the, like, it's hard. Dejanay Carrington is out there defending. It is hard. I think McGregor is down there defending. Asia Wilson is defending. It is hard. It is really hard. But we see that they adjusted. She adjusted. Angel Reese adjusted. Rakia Jackson is balling, adjusted. Like, that is all we were saying. Give these women time to get used to the league that they're in, and they will find their way and they will be excellent. And we have had a great time watching their maturation over their rookie year.
No, totally agree. What do you make of this rookie class overall? Bummer that Cameron Brink got hurt. Angel Reese got hurt. It's just very unfortunate, but still a lot of rookies making noise. Where do you gauge this rookie class compared to others? I know Gino Auriemma said that I think he just disparaged the rookie class, which was ridiculous. But I was just wondering, in your mind, how do you compare kind of this class with all the attention compared to maybe the previous rookies of the league?
Well, I definitely think in terms of popularity, this is probably the most popular rookie class that I've seen in a very long time. Like, if at all. Like, this was a very popular rookie class. In terms of what they've been able to accomplish this rookie year, again, despite Angel being hurt, she had an incredible season. Like, she had an incredible season. Caitlin, can't say enough about her. Most likely going to be rookie of the year. Hate that Cameron Brink didn't get a chance to make it out of June. Sure, she would have been incredible. Rakia just scored her 500th point for LA not too long ago. Aaliyah Edwards, it's a tough time in Washington, but that team is currently in a position to secure a playoff spot. Leonie Febish, she's been a huge piece for the New York Liberty. So I think this rookie class, in order to really rate where they are in history, it really will take a couple of years. You get what I mean? Like, you have to be able to look back and see who's still in the league, who's still impacting in whatever role is that they are, whether that's a starter or someone coming off the bench as a role player. I don't think you can really rate the rookie class just based on 1 year, because as I'm looking at rookie class of the past, I'm not looking at what they did their rookie year. I'm looking at how many players from that class have continued to find success in this league 2, 3, or 4 years after they have debuted. So I think I want to reserve my opinion on, from a talent perspective, this rookie class, just to see how they mature, how they grow. Because there were players in this rookie class that I feel like didn't make a roster and probably still should have. You can't forget Kate Martin. You can't forget Camila Cardoso. I think Deja Fair is amazing. And she was in this league playing for a little bit until she was cut by the Aces. But the point that I'm making is there are still opportunities that will be available, given that there are 3 new teams coming to the league. So we might need to hold back on really seeing where this rookie class is, because there are probably some stars who we didn't get to see debut this year, but may still be very impactful in the WNBA in the next year or two.
So I want to talk about the expansion, but I'd be remiss if I didn't discuss the playoff landscape and your thoughts on who you think is the favorite. Obviously, Asia Wilson's been killing it. I would say she's unanimous MVP. So something bizarre happens. Do you think with the Aces, I know they had a slow start, but now they seem to be coming into their own. Are they the presumptive favorite to win, or do you think the Liberty might be able to take them out? It seems like this like a heavyweight title fight. Or do you see any other teams kind of making their way to be spoilers there? Or do you think it's pretty obvious that those two teams are on a collision course?
Yeah, those 2 teams are definitely on a collision course. If the standings hold true to where they are today, I believe that they would be the 1 and the 4 matchup, which would essentially mean in the postseason, getting to the second round if Vegas gets out of their round and New York gets out of their round, they would actually meet in the semifinals. So there is no possible way right now for the Liberty and the Aces to see each other in the finals. Somebody's going to have to knock somebody out at some point. So that is possible. It's so tough to three-peat, right? But I think you got to respect the fact that they've done it twice, and they, regardless of their start, they're still in one of the top 4 teams in the league. So you certainly, have to show some love to Las Vegas, and you have to respect them as possible repeat champions for a third time. The team that I think folks know about, but still ain't really giving much respect to, is the Minnesota Lynx.
Agreed.
Minnesota is playing very well, has played very well for a majority of this season. They have already given New York several losses. They actually won the Commissioner's Cup this year, and they're coached by Cheryl Reeve, who quite literally can do everything in a coaching perspective, because she has. She's coached multiple championship teams already. She's coached the team to a gold medal this year. Like, Cheryl Reeve may possibly be in contention for Coach of the Year. So there is really no reason to think that this Minnesota Lynx team can't win the championship this year. So I think that might be the one team that I can see playing spoiler. But quite honestly, any of those 4 teams at the top, I could actually see winning a championship this year. I would be surprised if any of the bottom 4 teams like snuck in and won a championship. It's no disrespect or discredit to their talent.
Sure.
It's just, it's so hard at those top 4 that it will take a lot to be, if you're Seattle or Phoenix or Indiana or currently Washington, but that could change. It would be difficult for me to see any of those teams getting to the finals.
So I want to discuss league expansion. This broke as recording of this podcast. It's been rumored for months, but Portland will be gaining a WNBA team. The press conference will be happening later today as recording of this podcast. So that makes Toronto, Golden State, and then Portland as the 3 expansion teams. Once these teams are established, how do you think this league is going to change? Is it going to be what I'm thinking, sort of dramatic landscape in terms of just shifts of players, in terms of how this league is going to look, and who's going to be, like, I guess, the favorites going into the future? Or do you think, the teams that we currently know as being the kind of powerhouse teams, they'll still remain? Like, do you think this will have a massive effect once we get all these 3 teams into rotation?
Yeah, I do. Honestly, I think a lot of teams are going to shift. We have not yet been given any information on how the expansion draft will work. So I can't speak prematurely about what that could look like or what that might look like. I honestly have no idea. And I'm pretty sure that the league will, detail what that will look like. But it is incredibly exciting. And honestly, I feel like one more team has to be coming, because 15 is such an odd number.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
15 is such an odd number. You want to have 16, right? So I think with 16 teams, you still have the ability to keep 8 teams in your postseason play, but maybe this is an opportunity to go back to East and West, where we used to have the top teams in the East, top teams in the West, whatever. So this might be an opportunity to expand back to being more division centered. As we talked about a moment ago, with players who are very talented, but unfortunately there just were not enough spots in the league for them to make a roster. I think this certainly opens up the opportunity for some free agents who may have been cut prematurely, or who just didn't quite make a roster because the rosters were so stacked, or also because maybe teams just did not have the cap space to be able to afford some salaries. This gives them also an opportunity to play on those teams. There are some free agents, right? As we talk about new CBAs, new TV deals, there are going to be some free agents that are going to be out there. And a lot of these new teams may have an opportunity to kind of make a little bit of noise and have some conversations. So I just love the way that this has an ability to grow our league and grow our fan base. Portland is a great atmosphere from what I've been told. I remember the Portland Fire, which is the former WNBA team that was there from 2000 to 2002. And I remember the Portland fans were very excited about having Portland there, about having the fire there. They clearly have a basketball culture there with the Trailblazers. So it's not like it's an unfamiliar territory. Oregon State basketball, as well as Oregon's basketball, Sabrina Ionescu, hello, like they know what it means to support women's basketball in that area. And so there are a lot of opportunities for growth there. I do hope at some point, if there is another conversation about expanding, that we do come back to the East Coast for this particular part of the expansion. So if anyone's thinking about Philly, maybe thinking about Charlotte, that'd be great to put another team in the South. New Orleans would be awesome. You know, like I am, this just gets me excited for the opportunity of more growth and more people really wanting to put their money where their mouth is and invest in women's basketball.
So this is a selfish take. I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah.
Women's basketball is huge there. I realize Albuquerque is a small city. And it seems like with the WNBA, they're trying to get teams with other NBA teams so they kind of have that same ownership. Is that the strategy? Are they now looking for like different, maybe like a hot market that could have potential and an interest in women's basketball, but they don't have an NBA team? So is that disqualifying of a lot of just markets that are not within the NBA family? Or do you think with this expansion, they're strictly looking for cities to have an existing NBA team to pair both franchises together?
I would not say that is a precursor to being considered for a city. Okay. We've tried, the WNBA has tried that, has done that, right? I mean, at the beginning of this league, almost every team was paired with an NBA counterpart, because that's quite literally how the funding of this league like started. So a lot of teams had an NBA counterpart. I don't think you necessarily need that. I look at the Connecticut Sun, for example. Sure. There's no NBA team in Connecticut. There's a love for women's basketball in Connecticut, clearly, because UConn fans are all over this place. But there's no NBA team here, right? And so they have a relationship with the Boston Celtics, and they have built a brotherhood, sisterhood relationship with the Boston Celtics. But in the state of Connecticut alone, they are completely owned and operated by the Mohegan tribe. So I don't think that there is necessarily a precursor that you have to be associated in that way. I have no idea what Cathy's strategy is as it relates to what team she picks or what team she doesn't. I would assume that it would have to do with, number one, the city itself. There are a lot of places that, this is my personal belief, so I don't want anyone to think this comes from the league, sure. But just my personal belief is I think that exploring a city that fits with what this league is important, right? This is a league that is predominantly Black, predominantly queer. And if you are in a place where these players who have to live here may not necessarily feel comfortable because of policies that may be put in place, laws that may be put in place, things that may not be conducive to their lifestyle, it'd be very difficult to sell players on wanting to be there, right? So I think that considering that kind of thing is important. There's also obviously a need to have a very well vetted ownership group. How much are you truly looking to invest? Because the owners nowadays are making it hard for you to be mediocre. Climate Pledge Arena, the $1 million facility in Phoenix, the way that Las Vegas has turned up for their facility, like they are making it hard. Chicago's building a new complex. Like you've got to come correct in order to really be considered, I think, now for ownership, because there are more people really looking to invest into building up and giving these women what they deserve. So I think that's going to be considered. But also, I guess, lastly, I think it's probably going to be the fan base, right? Like, can they sustain a fan base? I do think the strategy of looking where there's a strong collegiate fan base is not a bad idea. I hear people talk about Tennessee all the time, Justin, and I say, you know what? I think Nashville, for example, or Memphis, Memphis has a great culture with the Grizzlies. Nashville has a great culture with the University of Tennessee. On the surface, it may be a blast having a women's basketball team in Nashville. But then I think about some of the laws in the state of Tennessee. Excellent. May not be conducive to the way that some of the players live, may not be conducive to the way some of the players interact. And that might deter them from saying, wait, I can't teach my kids to read from these books in the state of Tennessee, or I don't have reproductive rights in this state, or, that might be some things that they might want to reconsider. So I just think that holistically, there are a lot of things that, the league may be considering when they're picking a place to consider expansion.
Do you think the league has learned the lessons? You mentioned Portland had a team. I mean, the Houston Comets, I mean, in the early days of the a dynasty, and so many players remember to this day for that
Yeah.
time period. Do you think they have learned the lessons of some of the franchises that were part of the W originally, now not existing, keeping these core franchises once their expansion is complete, keeping these teams, just healthy and making sure that, nothing goes wrong again and losing those teams?
Yeah, I think there has been some lessons learned. I really do. I think that they have truly understood that in order for this league to continue to grow, they've got to find sustainability on their own. Too often, I'm from Detroit originally, grew up a Detroit Shock fan, and that franchise didn't survive in the city of Detroit because the owner at the time, who was also the owner of the Detroit Pistons, sold it. Right. And so now that franchise is in Dallas. It's the Dallas Wings. And so I say all that to say sustainability is important. You want to be able to sustain this franchise, whether or not it's attached or has a relationship with an NBA team. And you want to have that kind of structure to where it works, right? I think LA, for example, is an example of when it works. Minnesota is another example of when it works. Minnesota, the Timberwolves, the Lynx, they share the Target Center. They share quite a bit of events and community, opportunities, things like that. Like, I think that's an example of when it works. The Brooklyn Nets and the New York Liberty, another example. They share an arena, they share opportunities, they share ownership, and we'll get a chance to see that again with Golden State. The Valkyries will be owned by the same people who run the Golden State Warriors. And so there it is again, a chance for us to see how it can work well when it works. But if it doesn't work, how is this franchise sustainable besides that? And I think that's the biggest lesson that maybe the league has learned from before, because there weren't too many WNBA franchises that were sustainable once their NBA counterpart clocked out. So I think we will all be interested in seeing if that's the lesson that was learned.
Final question for you. I want to talk about Cathy Engelbert. I've been very critical of her. And most recently, just her comments, I believe, on CNBC, just about the harassment that a lot of the players have experienced. And I think her answer fell short. I think I'm really underplaying it. But I think there's other issues too with her leadership that I really have had some issues with. But talking to people that cover this league a lot more extensively than I do, I think have told me just to remain patient. I've actually given her a lot of props in terms of the future of this league and seeing this league have the most amount of eyeballs. But I would say, at least in my opinion, just observing it, seeing a lot more harassment of a lot of its players. Do you think Cathy Engelbert is the person to lead this league into the future? Just considering just the expansion, the new TV deal, they have a right to renegotiate. There's a lot of momentum behind this league. Is she the right person for this job and to take the WNBA to the next level? Which I think, with this potential, I think there's a lot of potential to really the W really moving its way into that top sphere of sports leagues. But I'm not sure if she's the person to do it, in my opinion.
You know what? I think I would tend to agree with those who told you to remain patient. And the only reason why I say that is because for me to say that somebody won't do it, I want to be solution oriented and say, well, who's the person that will?
Fair.
Or who's the person that should do it?
Fair.
And I don't have an answer to that, right? So I can't really call for this lady's job, and I don't even know who I would get in to replace her. With that, I would say, though, that I wholeheartedly agree that she missed the mark on on that response. It was like, we laid it here in a platter for you. All you had to do was pick it up and run with it, and you kind of dropped it. So I was also very critical of her response in that moment. I think that there have been a few opportunities to address some things this season that were not addressed, right? And I feel like it was part of the league's responsibility to address it. Not necessarily saying that we think by saying something that everything would change. No, that's not what we mean. We know that people are going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to say what they're going to say. They're going to act how they want to act. But players and dedicated fans want to know where you stand. They want to know where you stand on certain things, on certain issues. So even if those individuals don't change, we know that you're not supportive of it, that you don't condone it, that you at least have taken a stand to put some measures in place to kind of fight against it. You have to protect your players, right? There was an article and a police arrest just earlier this week of a man who was stalking Paige Beckers. And she's not even in the WNBA yet,
Crazy.
right?
Yeah.
Like those kinds of incidents are scary. And if it's happening to a college player, you don't think those things can happen or may have already happened to some of the professional players who may not have security, who may not have, all of the other measures in place that some players, have personally hired or personally have. It is very interesting. So these are things that I think Cathy thinks about and need to put in place to ensure that our players are safe, and that they are mentally in a good space, because people can be very evil and very mean and mean spirited online. Yeah, it's so there's that. But as it relates to the business acumen, I will say this about Cathy. She does get the business, right? She led Deloitte for quite a while. She does get the business. And I cannot discredit the business work that has been done with the expansion, with bringing in other partners, bringing in other businesses to invest, adding a social element, like officially, because we know the players did that. The players, put that in place and made sure that that was something that was important to them, because this league has always been very socially active driven. But to formalize it, and make it a staple part of the WNBA, I can't discredit her for those things. I just hope that as long as she remains commissioner, that there are other aspects that she hasn't quite yet grasped, that someone in her corner helps her to understand is important to us as fans, is important to us as media, and it's certainly important to us as Black women, that you address this and that you tackle it and you do it in a way that makes sense and not kind of glance over it because you're privileged enough to not have to deal with it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm really into kind of sports that are undercovered and leagues that are growing, and I have seen that the leagues that are the most aggressive and that they're the biggest advocates for its athletes in the league itself usually have the biggest chance of succeeding. And I just hope for Cathy, she does that. And I have just
Yeah.
been highly skeptical, so I will take your advice. I'll try to be a little bit
We're
more
gonna be
patient.
patient.
Just a little bit of woosah, just let things play out. But this has been a fantastic chat, Terrika. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you please let our audience know where they can find you on social media, whatever projects you're working on? I know you follow and cover other sports as well. So if you have any other podcasts or different things that you're working on.
For sure. Well, yes, you can always find me on Twitter at She Knows Sports. You can also find me on Instagram at She Knows Sports _. And I currently co-host the 3-on-3 podcast by Inflection Network on iHeartRadio. So you can definitely follow at 3-on-3 podcast, or check us out. We definitely love it. I'm always around, always doing something. So you can't miss my upcoming endeavors if you follow me on social.
Awesome. Terrika, thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin.